Hello, everybody. This is the new Kevin Smith show, The Great Witness. The new adventure series is. I'm Dean Bell here with Professor Cat Fun, and the star of the show is Kevin, who will be sharing his experiences with us. We'll be commenting and gaining more awareness from them. So thank you, Kevin, for being here. Hello.
In this real side experience, it seemed I was on assignment again. Overall, our activities on the real side comprise of the extending of the opportunity of becoming more aware to all, to promote the true reality the all is, the real guides, and the real references that afford the blueprint to the superseding of the necessity of the simulators. As after all, this is the real purpose and the actual function of the simulators, that through the comparison, that creation, all the ideas of it and the personal self provides, can the ears be recognized. To recognize something that is everything only being possible by comparing it to what isn't everything, and what isn't everything must be encapsulated pieces of it that are isolated as frequency idea packages through the activation of the aspects of the vehicles of the self, which, when installing these idea frequencies into the consciousness, so their simulated effects can be experienced through the body vehicle mechanics that decode these idea frequencies. We decide on an idea, we agree to it, we install it in the consciousness. The consciousness also affects the body vehicles that then can decode these idea frequencies into a simulation. And as these ideas are encapsulated pieces, parts of the everything that life is, we then experience encapsulated, simulated realities that are that which are not this everything life is, and so we have our comparison. A personal self with its consciousness of illusions, and the real awareness, nowness, everything position. A position equatable with the sun as the best representation. That how every idea we generate, every thought and emotion, everything that effects from the created body vehicles into a simulation, all are ideas, all are pieces, all are what the isness is not. And so the real awareness utilizes its created personal self to afford these comparisons, and then a recognizing of the ears can be so from the only position where this is possible, through the real awareness which is a part of this true reality. And as the isness has its singular purpose of the endless recognition of itself, and real survival. So this expresses as all real awareness aspects embodied in simulated vehicles with this same overall drive, as all awareness is this isness, and so all individuals, regardless of the extent of their immersion into the personal self, this is in fact every individual's real intent and objective. And so, on a level of every being, on their real awareness level, so to speak, they will have this drive, this inclination, and all that prevents the recognition of it is the extent to which they are absorbed into the personal self. But even complete absorption, complete one-dimensional focus, and personal self-immersed individuals, under all the layers of their clung-to ideas, will be this real awareness, with this singular drive, and especially at this time, when the simulator is close to implosion, so have all individuals been approached on the real side and offered the opportunity, and now it falls on them to recognize it, to have this opportunity manage to filter through their decided layers of a personal self-illusion. But as all in creation have been approached, as all are this real awareness that has this drive for is recognition, all must recognize something in what is presented in regards to the real references, and if they can't, it's more a case of them choosing to pretend they don't, I would suggest. A case of cognitive dissonance. For how can you not see at least something in a presentation of what's real, considering that your true beingness is this real awareness, this isness, that these references point to? And so, as I said, this is the main thrust of our real side objectives, to perpetually promote this real opportunity and purpose, for as much as we are somewhat limited in our reach on the physical, as we work around all the decided consciousness obstacles, on the real side we are less limited. Distance and time no longer a factor, for in actuality, with there being no time or distance, so everything we will do according to our intent placement already is so, in the nowness of the real awareness isness reality, and only from the personal self perspective do we have sequences and rollout of the everything that is in fact present in the isness now, everything that is in relation to our intent placement, presented to us as a cause and effect on the physical, and as the experiences the personal self is shown in regards to the intent we have set. We are our intent, whatever it might be, and all simulated experience to the actualization of that intent, assuming we maintain it, already is complete in actuality. And the two states of being are the real awareness, nowness position, and the consciousness, personal self. And the process of awareness has us gradually move from a complete agreement with the personal self consciousness to a complete detachment and indifference to it, and a standing and supporting then of all life through the real awareness that we embrace as our true being self. Even though a complete agreement withdrawing may be so, an awareness process completed, a complete facing of all the ideas of the consciousness, and their subsequent release, we still will be in the overall simulator. Our consciousness is a part of the effecting of. If we still happen to be in creation, the difference is we would be more so like the animals and the birds before a personal self was created, where they are in the simulator and the experiences effected from the consciousness, but they are indifferent to the consciousness. They are not in agreement with it, as they would be directly animated through and standing in their real awareness state, which doesn't cling on to any idea of the consciousness. Like the sun shining, it is just a beingness position. And so, for those positioning themselves such that they have no agreement with the consciousness, all they are doing then is generating the simulated game they are in, and the overall simulator arena all consciousness is a part of effecting. And like an overall computer game, where the collective consciousness effects the overall simulator onto a collective screen, if it were just a case of the consciousness effecting the game arena, if everyone were positioned in the nowness of their indifferent to the consciousness real awareness, then this would be a manageable situation for the overall computer that decodes the overall consciousness onto the overall computer screen. But for every idea clung to, this is additional data that the overall computer must have running in the game. All the parts, the consciousness ideas that make up the simulator as it currently stands, must be there and present, but rather than just the current simulated experience being rendered on the screen and processed by the computer, it's as though all the ideas that make up the consciousness are as open files also, and overburden the overall simulator computer. And with the overall consciousness having developed and become compounded with restricting cause and effect ideas that it currently is, and with the vast majority unconscious and in full agreement with the consciousness, so is this the equivalent of all those individuals having then all their idea files clung to, open and present on the screen, and this then overall impacts the simulator, and it goes through its cycles, like a computer slowing down under the heavy load of data it must bear until it stops working. Then we need a new computer, a new simulator. And so for every individual going through their process of awareness, so are all these idea consciousness files that are open and running gradually turned off one by one. The game still there, but all the ideas that make it up are not held to, not all present with the game and open like apps or web pages on the screen. It would be like a library full of books. All are present and accessible, but we don't carry them around with us. But if we should carry every book of our consciousness library, and as we add more books to our load that we also choose to carry, we naturally deteriorate under the sheer effort carrying a library of books around with us requires. And so every being is precious as factors that can offset the simulator deterioration situation overall. And for the more aware individual, they will, through their awareness and recognition, have greater access to the entirety of creation effected from all the 5 body vehicles. They will have a greater access through the multi-dimensionality of the overall consciousness. Their consciousness is a part of that effects into the multi-dimensional simulated levels. Everyone is multi-dimensional, as they all have these body vehicles that are part of the effecting into a shared simulator, but the extent of their awareness and recognition of their multi-dimensional nature depends on their focus, intent, attention, etc. And as people limit themselves through their focus and attention, even though they have parts of themselves operating throughout the levels of creation, they are rather limited to certain parts of themselves. And so, when it comes to approaching individuals, we rather have to deal with their limitation of awareness and recognitional positioning. On the physical level, anyone's approachable. The most aware individual has a consciousness that is a part of the consciousness of the most unaware person, and so the same overall stadium, the overall simulator, is shared. The only factor is accessibility, in that what additional ideas are in the consciousness of those we wish to approach that presents as obstacles geographical distances, the decided laws of physics that dictate how individuals can be approached if they happen to be, say, in completely different creational planetary systems and positions. On the real side, then, we are not so limited, only as limited as we decide, as we are beyond the consciousness that presents its agreed to physical level restrictions of distance and time. An alien may have to travel through space in a craft to reach an individual on a different planet on the physical, but on the real side, beyond the consciousness, so can he just pop into the presence of the one he seeks. Although, according to the one we are approaching, according to how they are self-limited, dictates the options for approach we have. We could easily then be operating from a certain position in creation where we are aware of them, but they not of us, for example. And when it comes to those individuals who are very encased in their illusions, to enter their decided simulation, we rather must have direct agreement to do so, if indeed we intend that they can see us and our ears opportunity be conveyed, as despite people cocooning themselves in their illusions of ideas at any time, so can they receive individuals that they have agreements and attachments with, consciously or unconsciously, as any agreement with another is agreement to their consciousness, which is then taking on all the ideas that their consciousness comprises of, and having them uploaded into your own consciousness, like potentially having the consciousness avatars of all individuals we have agreements with always available for the individuals whose consciousness avatars they are, to step into them and feature in our experience. And we can rather do likewise. For if Jim has an agreement with me that I can always feature in his experience, no matter how closed off and limited, then this is rather than an agreement bundle of two avatar consciousness programs. If you agree and open yourself up to Jim, you get me also, and vice versa. And so it can be a case of the real awareness, as it is through all consciousness, and can see all agreement contracts, being able to find an individual that its personal self-consciousness and that of the one we are trying to approach both has an agreement with, and through that individual, through our hypothetical Jim character, have we a backdoor agreement into the experience of the one we seek to approach. For as I said, a consciousness you agree with is a package of all the ideas it comprises of, including the ideas that are the consciousness agreements with others, and so effectively you agree to experience the whole package. You allow the consciousness avatar vehicles into your game with the awareness that animates through them. It's all really about finding those agreements, finding those vehicles that we can then utilize to make our contacts and connections. But anyway, as I said, I was on assignment, and usually the assignments will always be according to what makes sense with life and awareness, but only if we are in a position where the personal self is placed aside. The real awareness then always operating in what makes the most sense with life, and the personal self is just taken through the various simulated situations, like a backseat passenger really, and trying to make sense of it all, to recognize what's taking place. The recognition also that can only be real awareness afforded, as the personal self alone only can deal with the simulated visuals, what is literally presented, as this is the design of the personal self, to perceive only the simulation. Sometimes, however, if the personal self comes to the fore too much, it can begin self-deciding as to what's taking place in the experiences, and the personal self only has its current memory files of experiential references to draw from, and so can never operate as effectively as if it just sits back and allows the real awareness to do what makes most sense. A real awareness that is through all consciousness can see and understand all particulars, and knows then exactly what to do in every circumstance, if the personal self doesn't intercede. And this can even extend then to assignments, for the real awareness will always be taking on the most awareness productive operations and real side activities through its personal self, that then not only has greater awareness and recognition of the ears earned, not only has then more simulated comparisons to recognize the ears from, but assignments that benefit all life. The personal self, if it intercedes, if it thinks it knows best, can never be as effective. And not only that, but the personal self can be more readily deceived, as only through the real awareness can intent be discerned beyond what we are presented with on the surface. And so, in this real side experience, I was on assignment, yes, and they appeared to be galactically orientated, but there was a discernible difference. As I said, when you have the personal self placed aside, and it is simply observing the simulation as according to the real awareness and its making sense with life operation, everything goes smoothly. Everything seems to work itself out. We seem to handle and deal with every eventuality. We make portals. We fly spacecraft. We interact with aliens in their own alien language, etc. All of which the personal self wouldn't know how to do, and so were the personal self more so at the helm, we would be crashing our spacecraft, we would be unable to make portals, we would be at a loss where alien communications are concerned. And these assignments in this experience were very much like this, that I was engaging with all manner of aliens, beings, and in exotic locations, but it's as though I was at a loss to know exactly what I was doing and why I was even there. It was as though, as I did receive impressions through the real awareness, that somehow I had moved myself into my limited personal self. As a consequence, I wouldn't generally then be shown any real side galactic experiences. They would still be going on as the overall intent is there, but to avoid the personal self interfering with the operations, as it would if we were indulging it, so would the personal self not be shown as such, and really the personal self wouldn't see them anyway, because as much as the real side, real awareness driven assignments require a standing in the nowness of the real awareness for them to be seen, so would an activating of the personal self overlayer filters that obscure the real awareness assignment view. And so really we aren't being denied these experiences, we are blocking the personal view of them through our not standing in the nowness of the real awareness. And so generally, as I said, this would lead to just having personal self-experiences. But it was as though my personal self was also enticed to participate in what it thought were galactic assignments. And although seemingly they had a galactic flavour, as I said, not only was it apparent that these could not be real awareness orchestrated experiences by virtue of my personal self being at the wheel and not knowing what was going on or what to do, but that it also seemed to be a deception of a kind. As again, the personal self cannot determine anything other than the surface visuals, and my impressions were that I had been invited to these assignments by ill-intended characters, and my personal self, that I evidently was immersed in at that moment, was unable to ascertain the ill intent, and so this was naturally a good time for these approaching beings with their offer of fake galactic assignments to strike. And a real awareness, if embraced, and the nowness of its reality assumed, can deal with all situations, as nothing through the personal self or its consciousness of ideas, of agreements, are hindering its ability to always do what makes sense, which would include the protecting of its simulated personal self where necessary. But my impressions were that not only had agreements in the consciousness facilitated the ability of these beings to approach me, but they were specific agreements yet to be released, which dictated their ability to exact control over me. And even though these agreements may be present, that we effectively can always be the potential victim of certain beings, that we have unaddressed and unreleased agreements of control surrendered to, as I said, a moving into the real awareness is a removing from the consciousness and the agreements it contains. And so the real awareness has the ability to handle the situation, which it can't if we are more so in the personal self, which includes then free will decision to experience that which the consciousness comprises of, including these adverse situations, and the ability of individuals to exercise control and dominance over us if such agreement permissions are present. And so I had been duped through my naive personal self to accept what seemed to be galactic assignments on the surface, to blunder through situations and alien worlds, but the ultimate objective of the ill-intended beings that through my agreements allowed not only their presence but their ability to exert control over me, was to bring me to a certain simulated position or realm, and then somehow imprison me there. It was rather difficult to describe, but it was as though I was somehow trapped in the presence of what were now these freakish, gargoyle-like beings, and they were preparing to transition me to an even more restricted position, a kind of containment, as they could do this by virtue of the agreements I had with them that this can be so. And yes, one could, regardless of situations, regardless of unaddressed agreements to control that allow these adverse experiences, at any moment step into the nowness of the real awareness, which then has us removed from the effects. For if we remove from the consciousness, we can't be the effects of any idea we no longer are in agreement with, as we do so, and can be extracted. But sometimes, for whatever reason, we can't as readily do so. Perhaps we are overly traumatized, or even emotionally enticed, that rather holds us to the personal self, and so we are disenabling ourselves from stepping from it and into the real awareness. But wait, there is always another card to play, for as our awareness is a part of all real awareness, that is this isness, that always does that which makes sense with the reality that it is, and through all the personal self-consciousness vehicles, if an individual overall with the real intent set does find themselves in such a situation, yes, of their own decided making, as everything must be, often then, as much as a personal self has hamstringed the ability of its real awareness to assist, the real awareness through other personal selves may not be so hampered, and so, with our overall intent with the ease, as we walk into our created predicaments, as we say, can't immediately extract ourselves from it through that which we are allowing to hold us to the personal self, which disallows our real awareness to extract the personal self. Agreements with other beings not so encumbered at that moment can assist. What is then really real awareness assisting itself, with everything being awareness, through one of its personal self vehicles that isn't blocking its abilities, that can afford assistance to another one of its personal self vehicles. That, yes, if that particular personal self retained and clung to the idea that affects the experience, then no assistance can alleviate the individual from what they are in fact deciding to experience. But if assistance can be ventured, then evidently, despite the predicament that the individual is struggling with, but perhaps unable to extricate themselves from, then there must be an overall decision to want to be extracted, and agreement then that this can be so. And so, just as I was about to be transitioned to this more contained position, I would have a simultaneous view suddenly of Dwayne marching into a recreation of my physical level town, as much as houses and the streets that contain them represent more than the personal self, and as this was a situation that had effected from my being immersed in my personal self, for whatever reason that I had done so, so the town that housed my street and the personal self representing house rather overall represented Dwayne entering my experience through the consciousness personal side, through open agreements I have with the guides and Dwayne, and he then was the means of my extraction. Again, it was difficult to determine what he did precisely, but he altered something, adjusted something, maybe something in my consciousness that was affecting my predicament. And as I would naturally be always in open agreement to whatever assistance Dwayne and the guides might bring to bear, so the guides and Dwayne can make such consciousness adjustments. And whatever he did, I was suddenly removed from my impending containment situation, and now in the presence of Dwayne, still in my overall recreated town, and Dwayne would speak to me about being more cautious with that which I take on and accept, especially if, for whatever reason, I am floundering around in my personal self, where discernment of the situation can be lacking, and the intent of individuals indeterminable. Dwayne was seemingly assisting a large group of other individuals also. In a similar fashion, he was adjusting, altering their consciousness limitations through the agreements extended to him, as though, as on experiences I have shared before, Dwayne was, as the real guides can do, assisting these individuals with a tap line removing. It was rather the spectacle, for as Dwayne proceeded, his body would glow with dazzling nuances of light, and the light extending from his hands and beaming all about the area we were in was like an intense strobe light event. And so, this experience would reveal how, yes, we are always on assignments that are awareness beneficial, but just as there is deception in the form of dark force UNUversities, and that the dark forces can mimic and adopt the forms of guides, etc., so it seems that they also, or agents and minions of them, will extend what seem to be on the surface these beneficial with all life assignments, but that are as deceptive and ill-intended as all their other creations. And so always we must err on the side of caution. We must always more so lean to the real awareness discernment, regardless of how things seem on the surface, as the personal self really is very clueless and readily hoodwinked. And also this experience would be a testament and verification again that Dwayne and the guides do watch out for and support those that support them, as we all support each other as we go through this process. And so I must extend my gratitude that Dwayne and the guides always are there and willing to assist on our behalf. For we do all have these funny personal selves, and mine certainly has its moments. And how the guides and Dwayne must have unparalleled patience to put up with these situations I often put myself in on the real side.
Okay, Kevin, phenomenal. Yes, that's like a whole novel, isn't it? But it's just terrific. And so this world has, you know, so much information. And I'm going to be writing another group today, the new Nowness Now. All went through these babysitting paths and lifetimes, etc. And the big step is to recognize the isness more so than any literalized idea of what life is. None of it works. It's all seeing and being. And so thank you so much, Kevin, for being the great witness. That's so cool. Thank you so much for everybody. Thank you.
Wayne was here, he heard that. So, yeah, he was, Dwayne and the real guides, our literal mind can't get around how they're always there, you know, they're in the now, this nowness that always is. So they see those that are supporting them, they support them, and they're in a sense protecting and guiding like they did to you. They're watching over, you could say, us, but through our literal mind, it's hard for us to see that, how that works in matter, energy, space, time. But with this nowness that just is, it's, you could say, possible that they see, you know, they see everything, at least from their real awareness, not necessarily their personal self, like Dwayne's personal self, but in his real awareness, everything's available there. And then we're watching something about this new documentary about quantum leaping, and reminded me of they're talking about like beaming people across, you know, long distances, like in Star Trek, through this concept of quantum leaping, where they can't quite figure out how things can project faster than the speed of light from one place to another, or I can't explain it. They can't even explain certain things, but it just kind of reminded me of that, and how maybe the aliens and people, you know, that have the technology can transport, and we'll probably be able to do that. Like the Tartarians, I think we're able to do some of that, but transport physical objects, including bodies, maybe take them apart, reassemble them in another location. Once the data is configured, you know, once the quantum molecular, you know, level data of what the physical object is, once that's collected and then it's able to be transported to another location or beamed or whatever, however it works. But no, the main thing is that, yeah, we all have protection. If we support the guides, they support us, and we have that unlimited amount of protection. And it really is our awareness. It's protecting us, you know, and it's beyond matter, energy, space, and time. Our real awareness is beyond all that. So hence multidimensional, and even more so. Even multidimensional refers to creation, but the isness, the life is just a reality that just is. And it's not that we're, again, adding anything to it. It's just that we're aligning ourselves to it in our own way, so we can become it, or we can, you know, do what it does, you could say, so that personal self does what it does, but our real awareness aligns itself with this isness, and then we're okay, you know, because we're part of life, the bigger picture. It's so cool the way it is, but to explain that, it's very hard. So appreciate you, Kevin, going into detail about how this, how it works and how things can be viewed differently. So thank you.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in one of the real side, extensively gigantic, UNUversal universities. For yes, it's as though they are continuing to extend in number and size all across the real side, and interconnecting also through various means. This, of course, is so for the personal self, and indeed the personal self of all the individuals involved with and taking lessons in these universities, something creationally visual to relate to. For the universities are a created thing, and eventually they will be superseded, in a sense, for those individuals that recognize the ears, and for such individuals that do start to see the ears, like the real guides that are constant in their presence in the universities, they can still enter creation and these universities and assist those that still require personal self, cause and effect experience, simulated worlds, structures, and motion from point to point for their ears recognitional comparison references. As the real guides operate from a position of isness, they rather are everywhere simultaneously. So it's not that they leave the real universes to enter a created university on the real side of creation. It would only seem that they do from the personal self perspective and view of others. So when we are in these universities on the real side, we have the illusion of distance and travelling through them and from one structure to another, much like any real side experience for the personal self. But as we can see, when we initially enter a scene on the real side, we are just there, as the real awareness is everywhere and affords the personal self the opening view of whatever and wherever of the everything in creation and the real side it wants to show the personal self. Then the experience rolls out as it does. I started off in a kind of dormitory, but had the impression that I had rather outgrown the tier of awareness, so to speak, that this dormitory represented. For yes, these universities are structured a little like regular schooling, in that as you progress with your process of becoming more aware, you rather elevate yourself through the tiers of the university and attend and participate in lessons and experiences that move your awareness process along even further, if you so decide. there is plenty of literal learning for the personal self of the material and real references. But of course, the references are not the reality, and much of the process does involve activating something different beyond the ideas we have routined ourselves to and have come to know up until each moment, that we can become aware of more than we currently are, and the process rolls on. So much of the real side UNUversity is very practical and hands-on. We have assignments. We go out and about in the field, as it were, visiting new places, encountering new species, and generally sharing the NUUU song and the ears as we go about earning our way, which, of course, has us gathering agreement accumulatively to the galactic endeavors and the offsetting of the simulator demise, as through the real awareness, as individuals decide to step into it and stand real with life, individuals move beyond being a contributing factor to the simulator's cause and effect deterioration. And so this combination of a theory and awareness enhancing practical activity has us becoming more aware and then qualifying us for higher tiers, literally speaking, in the UNUversities. So as I said, I was in this dormitory, but it was as though I had lagged a little behind with my process. And of course, there is no time limit for our process, but we ought not linger too long at a certain stage of it, for as the ease surges through a creation, we do rather have to keep up with it, or forfeit the opportunity of recognizing it this time around. For there were a group of new students occupying the dormitory now. They had aspired to this new position, and I was unfamiliar to them consequently. And although not an issue, I did have the urge to move on with my process. Maybe I had been a little lazy of late, maybe a little personal self-conviction and comfort as to my position. For it is an endless journey of recognition of this isness, and only stops when we decide or get too comfortable with where we are. I had the impression that I required an adventure, an assignment or situation that would spark the awareness again, jolt it out of its momentary comfort zone, activate something in order to see more, to be more, a step into the unknown, etc. The moment I considered this, two individuals manifested in the dormitory, I and this new group of individuals were in. They were human in appearance, but for one feature, they both had tails. Generally, in these UNUversities, only those with sincere, real intent can enter them. I imagine they are rather removed from the personal side of the real side, in that without real awareness connection and deciding to stand in the reality of that real awareness, these UNUversities would not be present. They operate in a reality all of their own, the reality of the real awareness and the is, but still operating in creation on the real side. Although on a few occasions I have seen former new friends who have stepped back feature briefly in these UNUversities and try to cause momentary distraction and confusion with the new students there. For of course these former new friends would know of these UNUversities, are aware of them, and would have certain abilities gleaned through a process of awareness now abandoned that they can utilize to cause disruption. They can rather worm their way into the UNUversities, but only briefly, seemingly, as though they can't stay for long. And in fact, I haven't seen any of these former new friends feature in these UNUversities of late, as though the longer they remain with their personal selves, what abilities they had, the awareness they had accumulated, is being disconnected from again, and the range of their influence and presence is diminishing, until they are of little concern, and are like flies on an elephant's back. My real awareness discerned these two individuals with their tails to be sincere and not ill-intended, and in fact they actually were reptilians, assuming human form more or less, but electing to keep their tails for whatever reason. For yes, all manner of species are present in the real side UNUversities. It's all about intent and not body types, and regardless of what the individuals may have done up until this moment, it's what they decide now that counts. And so, yes, many reptilians are receiving their real education in the UNUversities too, and some are excelling to the extent that a few are becoming real guides, as I have shared on previous experiences, and some of the reptilians with exceptional awareness are teaching and training in these UNUversities also. It was as though my want to activate something, to take on an assignment, to move my awareness along, was instantly accommodated, as though these two reptilians were assigned to me, and indeed would invite me to join them on an adventure. It was of course an adventure that served a beneficial purpose, that would assist others, making sense with life, and in a turn I would earn further awareness, with everything equaling itself. The scene switched, and we were travelling through an open countryside. It seemed our objective was to provide assistance for a species, but a species that was rather difficult to reach, as though where they were located was at a concealed vibrational dimension or something. We had to somewhat find clues as to how to reach their dimensional realm. We would actually be sifting through the subconscious of certain individuals, as though the information contained there would provide clues. This was represented by us digging holes in the back gardens of various houses, which is, of course, the subconscious. It's as though knowledge of this dimension that we sought was locked into the subconscious, the causal records of certain individuals. Perhaps they had once had lifetimes there. These reptilians were remarkably adept at sifting through the subconscious and finding what they required. It seemed to be their skill, and unsurprisingly so, as reptilians are very knowledgeable about the subconscious. The Akashic records of the personal self. They are adept at time manipulation and understand cause and effect, how to alter causes to achieve desirable effect outcomes. For the reptilians, the dark force ones, it is their business to know everything required to maintain control of the simulator, and they surely know that the collective subconscious and its workings is the engine that overall drives the direction of simulator experience. So reptilians, when they decide to be real and step up, can be very instrumental and tremendous assets on the real side and creation, bringing their skills to bear, such as in this situation. And indeed, they uprooted the clues required from one of the subconscious gardens, and this expressed as a miniature flying saucer being unearthed, and contained within were tiny replica individuals that looked human but for their tiny sizes. For the species we sought were very human in appearance. They had great technology. They also were very small individually, about a centimetre in height. I'm uncertain if we had agreement to be rooting about in this subconscious back garden from the individual whose subconscious it was, or maybe we had permission from his real awareness and his personal self wasn't aware of it, because the very individual emerged from the back door of the house and started yelling at us to get out. We rather grinned sheepishly at each other. We had found the clue required to locate this dimensional realm of tiny humanoids, and so we faded from the subconscious back garden of the irate individual's house. The scene opened up in the very realm we had been seeking. It had the sense of being located and positioned in such a way as though it were technologically removed from everywhere else in creation, as though operating in an artificial frequency or dimension, perhaps as a means of protection from the creational, war-like species. So yes, these tiny people seemed very advanced technically, but it's as though they had inadvertently imprisoned themselves in this artificial dimension with no means of extricating themselves from it. Not a problem if everything was fine, but something had gone very wrong. Their world or dimension had deteriorated into a kind of hellish realm. There was fire, streams of lava. I had the impression that it hadn't started off this way, but something had gone wrong with their overall operation, that of removing themselves from creation into a pocket dimension concealed within it. I had the further impression that the overall cause they had set in motion somehow had more aligned them with the lower astral, and gradually the lower astral had rather infringed and merged with their realm, literally bringing hell to them. And indeed, huge rampaging monsters were present and slaying all the tiny humans. It looked like a scene out of Dante's Inferno. And as I said, it's as though once activated, once their technology had secured them this artificial dimensional spot in creation, they couldn't go back, as though it was a one-way ticket. And here we were, the two reptilians and I. We were on a rescue assignment, having located this hidden dimensional realm, and we represented the only means of escape for these terrified people. What transpired next skipped several scenes, and what I saw rather merged and blended like too many television channels bombarding too much imagery all at once, that made then little sense to my personal self. But the overall sense was that we fought the monsters, bested them, did what was necessary to put down the threat they represented. We gathered every surviving individual and secured them in a gigantic spaceship. The ship had similar technology to that which these people had initially utilized to get here in the first place. It had interdimensional capability, and so was able to relocate this entire race to a safe haven. With the individuals being so tiny in size, not as big a ship would be required as you might have thought for the relocation of this entire species. With our objective complete, we then removed ourselves from this doomed, created, dimensional realm, now devoid of anything but the monsters that remained. So we had completed our awareness bolstering assignment, earning our awareness and way through the beneficial activity we had just undertaken. the objective we had completed, and perhaps the species we had rescued would be brought around also to what we're doing with the galactic operation overall, for with their technological abilities they surely would be very useful. I'm sure the opportunity of becoming more aware would have been extended to them, as is a standard for all species and individuals we generally meet on the real side. Before the experience ended, my two reptilian companions assumed their actual forms. They were indeed lizard-like, walking on two legs, with their tails and such, but they did have a very distinctive look about them that set them apart from other reptilians and reptilian races I had encountered. Their bodies were a very dark green, but almost a shining emerald green in coloration. I thought it was actually a very delightful colour. Their bodies were not so much scaled, but more comprised of ridges. They had lizard-like heads, but the snout didn't protrude as much as most reptilians, a slight protrusion, but almost flat, like a human face. Throughout this experience, they had been male, though in human form with tails, but now in their actual body types, they now were female, for it seems they could shapeshift not only their body forms, but their genders also. They would speak to me about their shape-shifting ability, for as we know, everything in creation is a decided frequency in its base state that the created body vehicles then decode into holographic virtual reality experience, and that the shape-shifting is the ability to instantly alter the base frequency that expresses as the holographic body vehicle. Alter the frequency, you decode a different body vehicle that you perceive through the personal self. The reptilians then have developed the ability to change their frequency base body form state at will. It would be a form of creational manipulation then, the psychic sciences and the utilizing of the ethereal vehicle, because everything is as it is on the creational physical level, based on the decisions and agreements that have made it so. You can't then instantly change the physical level as you see fit, including the body types you have, unless you bypass the created consciousness that maintains and affects what your experience and body type are on the physical level, and that would be achieved by accessing the ethereal part of the created self. Presumably then, from that position, you make instant adjustments to the created consciousness in keeping with what you want to change. Then the effects instantly must be so. You wouldn't be conscious of how precisely you do this, only that through the intent to do it and the accessing of the ethereal self, you can instantly change anything in your experience on the physical level, including shape-shifting your form. Everyone is the effects now of what they have chosen and decided on, your body type reflecting your decisions, be it reptilian or human or anything else. So to change the body type, you must adjust everything in your created consciousness that resulted in the body type you are now in such a way to change it to the body type you wish to become, all instantaneous through the ethereal vehicle. Of course, the dabbling with the psychic sciences, the ethereal self, will have you caught in the effects of such as readily as any other ideas you create and agree with through the thoughts and emotions. The reptilians also showed me how this was achieved through technology, that you could target and attune it to an individual's body type frequency field and make adjustments that override the frequency with an alternative one, and the body type then must change in accordance with the new overriding frequency. So such a technology would be along the lines of black magic and creational manipulation, also a technology equivalent of ethereal vehicle psychic science manipulation, and the experience would end there.
Well, that's just a lot of fun, Kevin. That's terrific. Also, a point of interest, and that is that where you rescued these little guys from, these little gals or guys or whatever, yes, they're in this dimensional living hell which they created. And this is what these alien species and all the bad boys, etc., have created for themselves. They don't see it yet. So that's a good reference to bring up for them. And because you have whatever it is on the real side technology or what have you, whatever you want to call it, you have access to, just like you're doing videos here, you have access to that to bring that up and to show them, kind of like in Iron Man where he's just, doing his computer in the air. You have access to do this to show them that, they can join us and they can wake up or they can stay lost, etc. Because there are so many places that they've created that they don't even realize, but these individuals do. And so, yeah, this becomes the big adventure to eventually bring it forth in this realm, also to bring the two together so that the curtain starts to separate and everybody starts to see what's going on. But you got to be ready for that. It's a big preparation. And yes, this is where it's very important to learn to recognize the is, but this is so cool, isn't it? We have our own particular position here, and this is all being set up so that, with the universities, etc., that people have the opportunity to go through this and have a great life at the same time while learning about the whole of life and especially creation and all these things that are not necessary. That's so cool, Kevin.
Reptilians too, as well as other alien species, are seeing what we're doing and want to join and wake up and do better for themselves, right? You see that a lot on the real side too.
More so than not, to be honest.
Good.
I'm seeing more reptilians and alien beings and body types stepping up than not, but then again, I suppose you could argue, well, you know, the amount of people you encounter on the real side can only be a fraction of the billions and trillions that are out there, so it's very hard to quantify. But yeah, my impressions are that generally more people are at least looking to step up and at least looking to improve their position in creation than those that are not. As I said, because our assignments on the real side are very extensive, and we are going from one end of creation to another, presenting the ears and presenting the opportunity of becoming more aware and trying to garner agreement for our galactic assignments. And so even if individuals aren't stepping up, more people are aware of what we're doing than not. And so yes, it's a big overall operation.
You know that idea they say about people, most people are good in general, that people are good, you know, they're the bad eggs, etc., and whatever. But I think that relates in that sense of the overall universal position that all the beings are trying to improve their positions. And yeah, I think that that's, it feels like that's more of a given generally. But there are, yeah, we're all dealing with this contra force battle, obfuscation of consciousness and deception, etc., to keep one from the real awareness and or using the real awareness or being within that. So that's the whole like game board. It's one way I've just thought of it while you're talking there.
Okay, that's about it for me too today. Thank you, Kevin, for all the adventures bringing us on here. Thanks so much, Kevin. Thank you. And let's do the new you, which is tunes us into this real awareness that just is. We'll try it. New you. Professor? Kevin?
New you.